Hello and welcome to another episode of Becoming an Artist Creative Secrets Revealed. And today I'm speaking to the wonderful Alex Farkas, who is going to talk to us all about how artists can get their work into galleries and specifically into online galleries as well. So if you want to sell your work as an artist, this has so many valuable tips and so much valuable information in it. It's a great episode, so stay tuned for that. Also, if you want to go to becominganartist.co.uk, you can download all of the resources from all of the podcast episodes. And I've also created this becoming part of an online gallery, exact steps diagram that you can download there as well. So go there to download all the resources from all of the podcast episodes. And I hope you enjoy this episode, and I'll see you on the other side. Cool. Hello, everyone. So today I'm here with Alex Farkas, who founded UGallery in 2006 when he noticed that art patrons weren't able to easily acquire art outside of their local gallery scene. He had also studied art history at university, and he saw how hard it was for new artists to break into the market and be treated fairly. So, wanting to make a positive difference in the art world, he founded one of the first ever online art galleries, UGallery, which significantly improved the opportunities available for emerging artists and represents over 350 artists today. So lovely to have you here, Alex. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
I've got a few questions for you. I think it's be really good to chat to you and figure out how artists can approach you and other kind of online galleries, and if you've got any advice for them as well. So to start off with, can you just tell me a bit more about the process of you setting up UGallery and how you found your first artist to represent and how you got the word out to collectors? Just tell me a bit of the story behind that, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I started UGallery in 2006. I
Wow,
had been
it's a long time
studying
ago.
long time ago, really long time ago. I had been studying art history and sculpture at the University of Arizona, and
Oh, great.
my parents and myself, I was interested in business as well. So my mom encouraged me to pursue a degree in entrepreneurship in the business college, and they have this really cool year-long program where they help you come up with an idea for a business. You write a
Nice.
business plan, they teach you how to pitch it. And so I came up with this idea for UGallery because I was seeing all of these talented artists in the art school having a really difficult time making the leap from being student artists, emerging artists, to professional, full-time career artists. So we came up
Yeah.
with the idea for UGallery. I had two partners as well, and we wrote the business plan. The school liked our idea, and they coached us along and sent us to a couple business case competitions. There was a premier one in the United States and one in Canada, and we were lucky enough to win both competitions. And
Nice.
that became our initial seed money because they had cash prizes. So we uh, we pooled the earnings from the competitions and pretty much every cent in our bank accounts, and we built our first website and got started. And so it was a kind of an amazing wild ride in those early days. When we launched UGallery as one of really the first online galleries, this was a pretty new concept. People still weren't buying cars and food and everything else on the internet. The most common question people asked us was, is anyone really going to buy art without seeing it in person? So I think we really worked to help develop that space, and a lot of it
Yeah.
was our marketing and thinking creatively about how we can present art to people in a way that they could connect with in a picture, and how to do a good job with packaging and shipping and everything else. So it was really an adventure in the early days, and still continues to be, even though we've been in business now going on 18 years. I think there's a lot to learn always.
Yeah. And so can you talk to me a bit about how you said about kind of presenting the work with kind of good pictures and things that will kind of entice people to want to buy online? What was the process that you went through with that? Did you figure out better ways? What was the better way to sort of present the work of artists in the end?
Yeah. Well, I think that we learned pretty early on we started out showing one image of each artwork and realized, well, that wasn't quite enough. And even
Yeah.
quite enough for our system. We've always been a curated online gallery, which means we select the artists that we work with and we choose all the pieces that we show in the gallery. And we learned that we really needed to see more of the art for context. So we started asking artists to shoot art from different angles, a
Mm.
side shot of the piece, a picture of the art in context of a space, a close
Yeah.
up to show the details. These kind of became standards for how we worked with artists. And also, we created templates for how the art should look. So, if an artist can shoot well indoors, this is what the setting should look like. If they
Yeah,
need
that's
more
great.
natural light, how to shoot outside. And so, I think we did a lot in the early days to help artists understand that the picture was really the most important part of displaying the work. If it wasn't shot in nice lighting, and if there weren't a good kind of setup for the photography, that was a major point. And then also, we've started in the early days just letting artists post work without saying anything. And then we realized we really need a description to go along with the work. And
Yeah.
so we committed that if artists would give us a little bit of an idea of their thought process, we would write custom descriptions for every artwork. And so I think those two things became real cornerstones for helping customers be comfortable with the process, to understand more about the art. We always said the little bio that goes along with each piece is kind of a statement that if you own this piece, what would you say about it to your friends and family if they came
Yeah.
over? And so getting really clever about helping people feel comfortable with the art buying process. And that was also partly better understanding who our clients were. And that was certainly a learning process as well.
Yeah. So how did you find those kind of early clients? Was it through kind of doing these shows and things like that, or did you kind of reach out to people that you maybe thought might be interested in the art? What was the process there?
Yeah, great question. We had very limited marketing budget since we were just a couple kids out of school doing this. And we went with a PR approach, which worked out really well for us
Okay.
because, especially as a new business, you can always attract attention for PR. And since our concept was kind of novel for the time, we were able to get some really good hits in the early days. There were a few publications even that don't exist anymore. There was one called Daily
Right.
Candy, which was a daily email newsletter, and that
Yeah.
was our first really big press hit. I think we had something like I don't know, for our little gallery being a couple months old, we had something like 15,000 visitors on the first day that that hit took,
Wow.
and brought a bunch of business
Amazing.
to us. And so we really focused on PR in the first couple of years, and that was a
Yeah.
great strategy for us because even though it's not free in the sense that you spend time to do it, it's much less money than buying advertising. And so we crafted good stories and we kind of worked the ladder up until we got into some really big publications. Over time, we got into the New York Times and the Washington Post, and then a bunch of art publications as well. And we really learned it's all about the storytelling. So I think PR was a big driver for us. And then also, we were early in search engine optimization, which, if
Yeah.
you're familiar, it's getting your site ranked high in Google. So we did a lot in the early days to understand that. Those were things that we could do with our time versus our wallets, where we could, my partner and I, we just divided up the work and spent the time pitching stories and figuring out how to optimize our website. And then over time, we started to invest more in things like search engine marketing and those kinds of activities.
Yeah. And you kind of, I guess it's important to build the relationships with these collectors as well. So how
Yeah.
do you maintain those relationships with these collectors? Do you kind of get do you contact them um, specifically and kind of give them personal service, or is it kind of more of a just newsletter type thing? What's the process there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we've always viewed ourselves as being very personable within this space. I mean, I can say that there are a lot of online galleries, but most are marketplaces, which means anyone can show their work there, and they're
Yeah.
kind of impersonal, especially when it comes to the customer service. And we said from the early days, we want to differentiate ourselves. We really want to act like a traditional gallery, but with a little bit more reach for being online. So really we thought of ways, how can we be in touch with clients, everyone who wants to be in touch with us. So we've always kind of structured our marketing to be friendly and approachable and say, hey, if you want to talk to us, just give us a call. But we took it a step further. We picked up the phone and called clients. we started sending handwritten thank you cards to every customer. We started that in the
Okay.
early days, and we've kept doing that even today. So
Yeah.
anyone who buys art from us, we send them a note after the purchase. And even if
Great.
they buy 10 pieces, we still send them another card, every time they come back and buy from us. And we really try and make a point to keep track of who people are, follow up with them. If they bought work from an artist in the past and we have new work from that artist we think they'll like, we reach out. So a big
Yeah.
part of
Great.
the whole gallery relationship is kind of the long-term game, actually getting to know your customers and remembering them and being personable with them. And I think we get a lot for that. There's something to be said about making these relationships. We have clients who come back to us year after year. Some clients have bought 50, 60, 70 artworks from us. And I know that
Wow.
that's a large part because they like interacting with us. And we've had one woman who's been our art advisor at UGallery for 12 years now. So they know her by first name. And people can always talk to me too. I really
Yeah.
believe that that's a big part of what separates us.
Yeah. That's great. And how
Yeah.
did you go about kind of figuring out who in the really early days, how did you pick your first few artists? Were they people
Hmm.
who were going to the same school as you? Because you spoke about how you saw other artists from your school finding it difficult. Um,
Yeah.
was that kind of, did you go to the people that you knew, or did you reach out, or did you do an open call? What was the process there?
Yeah, that was wild. I think we learned really early on that we didn't just have our customers as the clients buying art, but we also had artists as our customers too. And it was so
Yeah.
important to develop those relationships. Very chicken and the egg, because if we didn't have art, we didn't have customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we spent a lot of time, and I laugh about this now, but I did start with artists who I knew at school at the University of Arizona, which was really helpful. There was some very talented people there, and I think because of them, we were able to get UGallery off the ground because they were committed. We had nice relationships with them. I spent a lot of time with them in person, and then I kind of hit the road and I started traveling all over the country visiting art
Wow.
schools because in the early days we were very focused on student artists. For the first year and a half, that really was our direction. And then we kind of owned that space pretty quickly. And we also realized student artists aren't necessarily the ones most asking for what we were doing. We realized it was people
Okay.
who were a little farther along in their career who really wanted to work with an online gallery for a number
Yeah.
of reasons. But I was saying I was laughing because in the early days we would offer artists $100 if they would put 5 pieces of art on our website.
Okay.
Like no questions asked, we would send them a check. That's how much we wanted art on UGallery. I mean, totally different now. We receive probably 100 applications a week now, and we take
Wow.
probably maybe 5% or less of that.
Yeah.
So it's really very different. But it was convincing people at the time, not only should they buy art on the internet, but they should also sell their art on the internet, and that we would be a good
Mm.
viable solution for that. Yeah, it was a funny time. It was really fun for me. I got to travel all over the country, meet
Yeah.
really fantastic people, and then it grew from there. And now I'd say with mostly the most successful relationships coming from referrals. So artists that we already work with telling studio mates and people they know that UGallery is a good fit, that they've done well, and they send them along to us.
Oh, fantastic. It does sound fun
Yeah.
traveling around and just chatting to artists and trying to get them to come. Nice bit of curation and things going on there. With you choosing the artists, I was just wondering about kind of, do you have to put your personal taste aside? Because like if you don't like a certain style of art, but you think it'll sell, is that something that you have to do, or are you just completely open to whatever? Or how how do you find that process of choosing?
Very fascinating. Well, in the early days, we thought we're opening UGallery because it'll be a great opportunity for people our age to buy art. Recent college graduates, people who want to own something other than prints and posters. But
Yeah,
we learned, maybe not as fast even as we should have, that you're never your customer, really.
yeah,
And then over time, we really learned that the average client that we work with now is typically 50 to 70 years old. They're people whose children are graduated from college and now they have disposable income. They're still working. It's kind of
Yeah.
the joke in the art world is people start buying art after their last kid finishes school and before they buy their first sports car. And so I
Okay.
think we found that's very true. And we've even developed our own customer avatar who we
Yeah.
talk to in all of our marketing activities. She's a lady named Mary. She's very sweet. But everything we do is focused about talking to one person
Yeah.
in this kind of marketing. But certainly with curation, there were different periods of time where I felt differently about it. When I was young, my taste was definitely a lot more edgy, I think, than who our customers. I mean, you can kind of see behind me, I've got a painting of a fork and socket. Most of the art that is in my house is not necessarily what we sell. But I
Yeah.
also learned too that there's a real kind of interest in fun in developing the aesthetic of the gallery. And it didn't have to be my taste. I could pursue
Yeah.
my own particular interest on the side. And it was interesting to listen to what customers were looking for, and also realizing that for the most part, as a gallery, our aesthetic is selling things for people to have really nice, beautiful homes, things that are peaceful and enjoyable to look at and make them proud of where they live and work. And so, as much as I like very kind of offbeat and edgy things, that wasn't necessarily what we sold. But also keeping in mind that it's important to have kind of a rounded look. And I think in any kind of merchandising, whether it's for art or a home decor store or anything, it's good to kind of cross merchandise because it elevates everything. And so we stopped saying after a while that we're there to serve everyone, because that's the misnomer I think for most businesses when they get going, is that we're here to help everyone find original art. And we said, well, no, actually our gallery is focused on helping Mary find original art. And so
Good
part
old
of that is
Mary.
the kind of, yeah, good old Mary, and having this evolution of our aesthetic is really fun. And in some ways, by limiting yourself, you kind of open the door to being a lot more creative and doing different things in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's quite a fun thing to do. Just kind of curating that curation process is exciting, isn't
Yeah.
it? To kind of get to choose get to choose these artists and get to know them
Yeah.
and get to know their stories. Are there any kind of specific success stories that you can talk about with your when it comes to your artists? Are there any people that really stick out for you who've done really, really well through your gallery?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with a number of people who I think count UGallery as their full-time art career. So we have
Fantastic.
artists who provide us new work every week, and we sell their art every week. That
Wow, that's
isn't even
amazing.
limited to a few people. Uh, Partly what we have by limiting how many artists we show is this ability to support more people. The internet, especially when I was kind of coming of age and starting this business, was really in a long tail thinking. That's the Amazon mindset, where you could show one of every type of art forever. And even if you only sold one piece of that particular type of art every now and then, it's good for the business. But in the reverse, that's not so good for artists, because then maybe if I only sell one of your artworks a year, that's not actually doing anything meaningful for your career. So we got really focused. We work right now with about 350 artists, which is still a lot of people, but in the scope of the internet is not so big.
Yeah.
And it gives us the opportunity to have personal relationships with those artists and kind of help them with stages of their career. You asked about specific success stories. There have been a few artists who have done very well with us. There was one woman a few years ago named Iris Scott. She was a finger painter, and she became really well known for her finger painting. She started with us. I had met her, and she was just done with school, and she was trying to sell her work for a couple $100 a painting. And we got together and figured out we could do a lot more if we kind of structured what she was doing. We helped her with figuring out how to put together her content, how to create series, how to raise her prices, and
Wow.
now she sells her work for $50 to $100,000 a piece. And we got started
Wow.
selling her work for like $500 a painting, and so we worked it up over time until we were selling her work for those prices. And uh, that kind of thing. That's like the ultimate success story, obviously, but
Yeah.
for me, I really like to have good relationships with people where I get to know them over time and I can give them the advice and to do the things with their career that they want, because not even everyone necessarily wants what Iris and I did together. I think there are varying levels of how people want to interact and how much art they want to make, what their goals are. So I think it's a lot about kind of tailoring the experience to work with the artist and so that it works with us too. We kind of evaluate our relationships every year to see if it makes sense from both sides because it's really important. I want to make sure that both parties are having a good time and getting something
Yeah,
out of it.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's from what you've just spoken about, it's really interesting that you helped develop Iris's career and you kind of maybe gave her tools and advice and maybe a bit of is did you kind of give her a bit of direction with regards to her artwork as well, kind of maybe if you try this and things like that, was that kind of what you did in terms of knowing what might sell better and things like that?
Absolutely, to an extent. I've always been cautious about telling people what to paint
Yeah,
because that's part of the magic of being an artist and having
yeah,
control over that. But certainly having discussions about where she could go and even just thinking about what she wanted to do with her art.
yeah,
The one example I always like to give to people in kind of general terms is where do you want to see your art? For example, if an artist comes to me and says, I want my art to be in museums, and I say,
yeah.
well, all you're painting are these little paintings. Have you ever been in a museum? Everything is huge. You need to start painting larger. And I think that that's kind of simplistic, but to the point
Yeah,
where you really have to think if your end goal is being in a museum, then what does museum art look like? And then how do you reach the people who are the decision makers to buy that art and so forth and kind of take the steps backwards? So, not so much as telling people paint this or that, but say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish and what are you interested in making? Really, if I were to tell an artist to paint dogs versus landscapes or whatever it might be, I don't think that would ever be successful because that is kind of stripping away the beauty of art creation. And there's this really important kind of visceral, fundamental element of making art where it's this human expression. So I can
yeah.
only do so much in that regard, but also, helping people once they have the kind of tools in place to make art, giving them kind of the overview of what I see from the business side.
Yeah, I think that's really, really useful. And this is a discussion that I have with a lot of artists on this podcast is this bit in between you making something and wanting to connect with people through your art and also kind of figuring out I always struggle with the wording of this because it's just exactly what we're speaking about, but and where you don't want to change too much of the essence of what you're doing, but maybe considering exactly what you said, like where you're going to place that art and where you want to go with it, and maybe adjusting it, as you say, maybe if you want to be in museums, making it bigger. Or I mean, I'm not saying, the public want cats at the moment, so you have to paint loads of cats, but just maybe considering a little bit of maybe what people want might be useful in terms of meshing it with what you're doing, just to
Yeah.
make more of those connections. And um, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because it's, you can get this artist ego where they just want to, they don't care if people like it, and but that's kind of, I think, restricting yourself, and not kind of the point of art is to connect with people, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an ongoing question, an ongoing discussion, isn't it, how much you change your
Yeah.
art for the audience.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting too. I mean, I think that's a lot of decision making in terms of how commercial or anti-commercial you want to be with your work.
Yeah,
There is a whole spectrum of where you can exist in art making, from it's a profession and you make art to sell it so that you can keep making more art. My mom, she was a potter. When I was
yeah,
growing up, she was kind of at the tail end of her pottery making and she was having a gallery. And so I think that's where I learned the gallery business, but I really learned from her because she is a master at the business side. She was so good with realizing I need to make X number of pieces and sell X number of pieces, to understanding the math. And she made really beautiful pottery, but also she was doing it as a business and she knew that. And so I think there's so many kind of shades of that, and deciding
mm,
what you want to be doing. She was doing it because that was her profession and that's how she wanted to make her money. But then I also encounter people from time to time where we go through the discussion and they aren't interested in kind of catering their art in any form to a commercial side, and that's fine. But then they certainly my relationship with them doesn't usually go much farther because I'm in the business of selling art,
That's it.
and that's
Yeah.
okay though. Yeah, it's all okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you just want to do it as a hobby and you're not worried about selling it, and it's just for you or whatever, or friends or whatever, then it's fine. Absolutely. But if you want to make a living from it, there's kind of certain questions, and there's certain um, bits of research, I think, that you have to do to kind of,
Yeah,
yeah, not starve, I
yeah.
suppose.
Understanding that side of the business is a big deal for being a professional artist. We've been talking today about marketing and how do you reach people. And really, for the most successful artists I see, it's almost a 50-50 job, or at least they're hiring someone, a gallery or an assistant to help them with the marketing side, because you
Yeah,
really have to think so far ahead of one, even as a gallery, we're saying, okay, we have Mary, who we talk to as our customer, and she's a very developed person. You know, she lives in Palo Alto, California. She works as an attorney. She has kids, everything like that. But I think it's similar for artists too, to think to some extent who is their target for the work they're making, and then
yeah,
focusing on how to reach those people. And there's so many different types of clients, and how do you get to them? Marketing your art to sell to end consumers who want to decorate their beach house is different from selling to institutions who are going to display your art publicly. There's so many different ways you can sell your work, and I think as artists, sometimes you kind of can get lost as deciding what that marketing side is. But it's important to focus on it, and I think having good advisors to help you with it is nice too. If your focus is on creating the art, find people who can help you to do the other piece of it too. That's where a good gallery or a good associate comes in.
yeah, absolutely. And with when you spoke about earlier, you spoke about kind of getting your work in museums. If someone, or yeah, like big museums, if someone came to you and wanted to do that, as well as selling their work through you, would you would you be able to give them advice on that and help them with that process?
I would certainly try. Um, I haven't done too much of that in the UGallery business. A few people have talked about it, and we've discussed routes for finding public buyers and things like that. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, as much as I can assist people with what they're trying to do and it makes sense for them and for our business, absolutely. I always have coached artists that no matter if it's UGallery or another gallery, there's typically not a one solution fits all. And in fact,
yeah,
in business, we often talk about single points of failure. So you don't always want to have, actually, you never want to have all of your eggs in one basket. So having only one person who sells your art isn't good, because what happens if they change directions or go out of business? So I've always said UGallery is supposed to be kind of one piece in your marketing and sales arsenal. We want to be your online exposure. We want to make business for you through the internet, but also it's good to pursue physical galleries as well,
yeah.
and also opportunities for shows in your local cities and things like that. So I think that as much as I can advise artists on having a multi-pronged approach, that's really good, because they'll reach more people and hopefully sell more art and get their art on more walls.
Absolutely. And I think quite a lot of artists tend to have quite a few different income streams as well. I was
Yeah.
speaking to to Matt Henry in the last podcast
Hmm.
episode, and he is an art photographer, and he's in kind of quite a few big galleries, but he also does landscape gardening, which which he enjoys, getting outside and things like that. Because
Yeah.
I think it's good to have that balance as well. And he advises that you should do something completely separate to the art world if you're kind of,
Hmm.
it's not, that's obviously not for everyone, but artists can do so much now. They can kind of, there's lots of ways you can sell your art. You can put your art on different products and things like that. You can sell
Yeah.
prints. There's lots of print on demand sites and things like that. Do any of your artists do kind of do things like that? Do they have other kind of strict income streams or kind of things like that they do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to even to your point, a lot of artists still don't do their art full time as their
Yeah.
careers, so there is that element of it. But certainly, a lot of the artists we work with, they do work with multiple galleries. I think that's the most common approach where they'll
Okay.
have galleries in different cities, and
Right.
that's again kind of differentiating. One artist who comes to mind, she paints these really kind of magnificent seascapes. She chose galleries in coastal cities on the West
Yeah.
Coast because she could get to them. She lived on the West Coast, and they didn't compete with each other. And then she also worked with us. So I think having that kind of strategy in mind is really nice. And yeah, I mean, certainly kind of being creative. There's a friend of mine, he just hits the pavement. He makes kind of collage art, and he'll go to a new city. He'll create a series of work within like a week's time, and then he'll go into all of the kind of like arts and gift stores to sell the collection. He'll go to Chicago, he'll create a series of Chicago scenes, and then he'll go
Oh,
and
yeah.
sell them, and he'll just do this as kind of a fun thing. He'll travel to a few cities every year, and
Yeah.
it's so cool because then these places often reorder the things, and it's stuff you're talking about. Sometimes he's selling little prints of his work for $50 to $100 a piece, or cards and things like that. And it works so well for him. So just being creative about how you create these revenue streams. And he also has his more expensive gallery work, but he likes doing this stuff too because it's kind of fast and fun in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds really cool just to kind of have that interaction and that immediate feedback as well. You're kind of going and doing something and then you're going in and as you say, hitting the pavements and speaking to people in these
Yeah,
places, in these shops and in these galleries. And that sounds really cool. I just a bit of a question. It's something that's come up as well on other podcast episodes. How you spoke about brick and mortar galleries. How
yeah.
would you advise people approach those type of galleries? Would you, because sometimes there's
Mm,
a big barrier to kind of getting in, I think, for artists to be able to get into those sort of galleries. I know with yours there's an application process, but for
yeah.
kind of like in IRL galleries, they don't seem to kind of open their doors very easily to people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can speak from my experience growing up in my mom's gallery and kind of what I've observed now working in this world. And mostly, I think the whole art world is a relationship based business. But also, I think for artists trying to get into specific galleries, it's a lot about observing and seeing how their work fits in. Kind of back to what we were talking
Mm,
about, really identifying the targets. One thing I
yeah,
see even in our business is we get artists who come to us with work that's totally different than anything we show. Um, and by that, I mean, not even aesthetically, but for example, we don't show any photography on UGallery. We only show paintings at this point. And
yeah,
we'll say, well, your art's not quite the right fit for us. And sometimes they even get upset with us, about
yeah,
why this or that. And for me, it's kind of funny because it's really just about paying attention to what the gallery does. If you are so intent on working with us, I guess it's understanding a little bit about how your art fits into their program. And so for getting
yeah,
into physical galleries, I think it's a lot about paying attention to making sure that your work actually is a fit in some way. And then
yeah,
being courteous and reaching out to people. Some of the old school techniques I think are still the best, which is sending handwritten notes to people is nice. Going and meeting them in person, but also not surprising them. Like setting up a meeting, saying, "Hey, I want to come in and talk to you. Can I do that?"
yeah,
And then once you have your meeting, send them a note afterwards to say thanks for your time. Just some of these
yeah,
really basic kind of social interactions go a long way. Because the truth is, galleries only have a limited amount of wall space, but we're all always looking for the right art to come in, and we always want something new and interesting to show. So I think it's mostly about being a good matchmaker to understand that your art and your personality fit into this place, as well as just you wanting to kind of insert yourself in there if it doesn't work. That's been my observation. Same thing when I was in my mom's gallery, even as a child, watching people come in. And the people who came in and had something that was the right fit and they approached her about it, she was always thrilled. And so
yeah,
I don't think things have changed that much within that regard.
yeah. I think that's really kind of fundamental and something really to take note of, because yeah, I think people forget sometimes that maybe they're just not a good fit, and they don't, because you can kind of get so embroiled in your art and you think you're really kind of passionate about what you're doing, and then you kind of forget that it needs to fit with what this gallery is doing as well, and that's kind of part of the thing. So I think
Yeah.
that's just really useful fundamental kind of advice for people. With regards to you choosing people for your gallery, is it really important for them to have an online presence? Like, for example, do you look at kind of how many Instagram followers they have or things like that? Is that something that kind of affects your decision?
Yes, but maybe not in how you'd expect me to answer that.
Okay.
Social media has no effect. I really don't pay attention to artists' social channels. We might look at them to see the work, but followers don't matter. The one thing
Okay.
that does matter for us is having too much online exposure, which is really not usually what people expect me to say, but having your art on too many online galleries or just too many places is overwhelming. And if I find it overwhelming, it's not a good play for me to bring them into our gallery, because people like our Mary customer is savvy and she will Google people's names after she finds something she likes on our site. And
Right.
especially if an artist, say, decides to post the same painting, say the same 10 paintings on 10 different platforms and online galleries, then it's kind of a distraction for Mary. One, knowing if the art is original and one of a kind or if it's a print, and also where you buy it. Oftentimes, the prices can be different in the different spaces. All that
Yeah.
stuff kind of undermines consumer confidence. So, for me, when I evaluate an artist's web presence, I actually prefer that there's less of it, because then I kind of get to control the narrative a little bit more. And by control the narrative, help them develop it. So,
Yeah.
making good decisions. And um, I always say to artists, if you're going to choose to work with multiple online galleries, pick just a few, like two, maybe three tops. Don't show the same art on any of them. Create
Yeah.
specific series for each of them and make
Yeah.
sure all the pricing is consistent. And
Yeah.
so when we evaluate an artist portfolio, when they apply to us, we'll see, do they have a signature style? Is it something that's identifiable? Say, oh, yeah, I can tell that's an Alex Farkas right there. That's kind of a big piece of it. And then seeing, is there something kind of cohesive within it that really speaks to us. And then after that, this kind of web presence piece is really important. And we can usually help with other parts. I'll pay attention to pricing. That's another thing, talking about if your art is a good fit for a gallery. Pricing is a big deal because all of us gallerists kind of know what our price points are. So the art has to reflect in that as well. But that's stuff that can be advised on. And then finally, I always pay attention to quality. So making sure artists are using uh, good quality materials, good canvases, good paints, things like that. We sell heirloom quality art to our customers, so that
Yeah.
needs to be reflected in the fact that it needs to last and look good. And so there's a number of pieces, but I think that web presence thing is often confusing to people, but there's good reason for why we want limited exposure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I get that. That's a really interesting point. And I think what's also, there's kind of certain, are there certain standards that people need to look to have, their own personal artist site that they have? Are there certain things that you would expect a professional artist to have on their
Hmm.
website, and you can look for those things? Are there certain pointers that you can give people, like, I
Yeah,
suppose, artist statement or things like that? Or I think someone else was mentioning maybe having you mentioned having the work in context as well, because I think a lot of artists forget that people want to see what it looks like on a wall, and
yeah,
it's not just about kind of just showing the kind of digital image of the kind of exact size. Seeing the work in context and things like that. Are there other things as well that you think artists
yeah.
should kind of have on their website?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, it's also determining what you want to do with your website. So if you're going to sell art on your website, there are a lot more things you need. If your
Okay.
site is just for kind of presentation, say you're using your website to approach galleries, physical
Yeah.
and online galleries, then it can be a lot more simple. I always say sim simple is better. Uh, I only ever really like white background websites. That I think probably speaks to growing up in a gallery with white
Yeah,
walls and
absolutely.
growing up in a house with white walls. I always find it funny going to websites that have black backgrounds or brown backgrounds or anything like that
Yeah.
because honestly, it really draws away from the art. I don't like black frames either, but that's another story. Um, uh, the layout is important. I think keeping things organized in a way that's easy to follow. So having at least one page dedicated to your personal information, which I would say includes a small artist bio and an artist statement that you've had someone else proofread to give you kind of pointers, because it's always good to hear what other people think of your writing. And if you're not strong in writing, have someone else write it for you, even. And
Yeah.
then laying out the portfolio section in a way where you group series together that makes sense, and
Okay.
also keeping sold and available work separate. I find this again and again where even for us, when I'm searching for a new artist and I come to their site and I love the work and I'm browsing, and then suddenly I'm realizing after I've looked through a bunch of it that all of the work I've looked through is sold and I can't have
Yeah.
it. And that's for a customer and for a gallery is a really kind of off-putting thing. So keeping those things
Okay.
separate, I think, is important. And then if you're getting into commerce, starting to sell, then certainly what we've talked about, having good quality images, not just one image, but showing the side, the art in context, a close
Yeah.
up, having a description for every piece, and really a description of the series and each piece that explains kind of what you'd want someone to say about the work at a cocktail party. It doesn't have to be tons and tons of writing, but 4 sentences or so to explain if you wanted to make someone sound really smart to talk about your art. And that just takes a lot more time. And again, that's where a place like a gallery comes in. When artists come to us, we write an artist bio for them. We write all the descriptions. We make sure that
Mm.
we have all the photos and we proof stuff. But if that's something someone's intent on, then yeah, setting up those pieces of the website is important.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I mean, it's another business, is another marketing strategy as an artist. So you have to decide if that's the route you want to go.
Yeah. And do you find that artists really struggle with the writing and describing their art at all, or is that kind of something they're okay with? I think sometimes there can be a bit of a disconnect there. They kind of people make the thing and then they don't know how to explain explain it. Do you find
Yeah.
that's something that happens?
The best explanation I've ever read about that is that people choose the medium to express themselves in which they're most literate. So painters
Yeah.
paint and writers write,
Yeah.
and so
Absolutely.
forth. So I think there is some truth to that. But then also, we can kind of all put on our marketing caps as well if we're going to do that sort of thing. And think about it from a really structured perspective. I think people can get into trouble if they don't have structure for how they go about doing those things, but trying to identify, saying, as I was saying, what are you going to say to someone at a cocktail party about your work? But choosing a structure for how you want to write about your work, what you want people to know. If you're going to focus on explaining about the subject matter or the style or maybe the materials used, I think that can make it a little bit less daunting. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the advice we give people too, is we can help you write these things if you give us clues about what to say about it. And so picking those clues goes a really long way, because an abstract painter really is going to talk probably a lot about the process and maybe the materials used, versus someone who's painting really classical scenes. It's probably a lot about what's in the scene itself and maybe the symbolic meaning of it. So I think that you can kind of demystify that a little bit. Um, really, writer's block is a thing for everyone, but you can always find ways around it and come up with ways to be a little bit more effective.
Yeah, I think AI can really help as well with things
Yeah,
like that
that's a
these
great
days.
suggestion. Yeah, yeah, it's
To
so
start.
true. Having those things as basic prompts even to work from
Yeah.
can go a long way. Yeah, use the tools at hand, certainly.
Absolutely. I think it's helped me quite a lot in the past. So yeah, just putting a few prompts in can kind of come up with sometimes it's a bit off the wall, but at least it's something to start with. Um, but yeah, are there any, when you speak to artists, when they first come to you, are there common struggles? Are there crossover struggles that they're all kind of having that you could talk about a bit?
Hmm. That's a good question. I don't know that I see a commonality in struggles. People come to us
Okay.
for different reasons.
Yeah.
Um, Certainly, there are some of the things we've talked about developing materials, getting the writing right about your artist statement and bios and things like that. Or some people come to us with questions on direction for their work, kind of as we were talking about earlier. How do I focus on some specific avenue? But it's really individual. I find a lot of the artists who come to us are just really focused on growing their business. So
Yeah.
they're looking for ways to find more exposure, meet new clients. I think that's what's so cool about the internet. I often think about this one customer we have. He's based in rural Iowa, and we met him a few years ago. And he said, uh, "You know, I love art. I travel to cities seldom, and he said, all the art around me is hunting scenes. And he's like, I don't like that kind of art. I want contemporary art. And so we kind of developed a relationship. And over the years, we've sold a lot of work to him. And
Yeah.
so I always think about that kind of as an example of this great exposure. If I had my gallery located in, Amsterdam or San Francisco, California, I would probably sell to the general radius, but that's it. And the internet
Yeah.
connects us in so many interesting ways. We ship art all over the world. And so I think that's a really cool part about the internet. That was really what drew me to starting this business in the first place so many years, is this idea that I could connect a student artist in Tucson, Arizona with a buyer in New York City. That kind of
Yeah.
thing just made me think, wow, how cool is that? And it just keeps
Yeah.
growing and growing. So I think that's the main thing, that artists come to us, this desire to sell more work and have more exposure for what they do. So that's really where we focus our attention. And then that comes down to us doing a good job with selling their work in a way that's compelling to people, telling their stories. The real focus of our marketing in the last couple of years has been storytelling, and that's not just kind of looking at art from some sort of academic perspective, or I think also maybe in the early days looking at our customer as though they needed to be educated about what art is. It's like, I don't need to tell my customer what impressionism is. I need to tell them a really interesting single anecdote about one painter. Like, this artist discovered, even though they were blind, that they could make incredible impressionist paintings and tell their journey, whatever it is. I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
making that up, but the
Yeah.
point being that having a real story to tell is what captivates people. And for example, we have a
Absolutely.
really vibrant email newsletter. We send 3 emails a week to our clients, and that's a big driver of business for us. We write all the emails from my voice, signed by me, and I say at the end of them, I read and respond to any replies. And it's always just telling one story at a time in the emails. And that goes so far. I am really blown away every week how many people write us and respond about the story that we tell. So I think that that's really the big hurdle for a lot of people, is figuring out how to do the storytelling piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a lot of well, most small businesses have
Yeah,
this kind of have a story behind them, don't they? And that's kind of how we connect to each other and how we connect to the world as well, is through these stories. It's just such a basic part of our human nature, and that's really and
yeah,
a really interesting way to draw people in is to kind of tell the story behind a piece or behind a person and why they make their art. It's just fascinating to everyone. I mean, that's kind of why I do this. I love hearing people's stories of
yeah,
how they got into what they're doing and why they why they're doing what they're
yeah,
doing. So yeah, it's really great to hear that, and I suppose it's really important for artists to start thinking about that if they want to, as you say, market themselves and sell their work, is kind of think about how they want to present that story, the story of them as an artist, and the story of why they create. And
yeah,
yeah, part of that needs to go on the website, and it can help you and things like that. So um, I'd like to talk a bit more about how people can approach your gallery
Hmm.
and what they would need to do and what kind of things they would need to have before coming to you. So
Yeah.
just as kind of like a kind of basic kind of idea, like general idea, if how many paintings would someone have to have done to kind of come to you if they were just like starting from scratch and they were just like, right, this is what I want to do, I want to do this, I've wanted to do it for ages. I guess there's like a minimum quantity that they would have to have, right, of work that
Yeah.
they would have had to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two answers to that question. The technical answer is we ask new artists to start with 12 pieces on our site. So that gives the portfolio a rounded look. It gives people some selection. And
Yeah.
that's really kind of where we like to start. Typically, the artists that we do really well with will show anywhere from 20 to 30 pieces at a time on UGallery. We also
Okay.
advise people that once they get started, it's not 12 and done, but we say, we'd like to see new art at least every couple of weeks. Give us a piece at minimum once a month, but really more than that. And I think it's kind of funny how self-fulfilling it is, but the artists who continue to provide us new work every week are the ones who do the best on our site. Um,
Okay.
I think there's that aspect of it, but then kind of on a deeper level for artists who are just getting started out, I think a lot of that is making enough art that you can start to define something that's unique to you, to develop your kind of aesthetic voice and create enough work to understand where you're going to be. Really, we do best with artists who are making art in series, and that was kind
Okay.
of something we learned in the early days working with student artists, where they not only weren't so sure what they were doing, but not really having decided on a particular style or subject matter, it became really difficult to tell the story because as good marketers, we want to develop this story and then use it kind of repeatedly to sell the work. And
Mm-hmm.
so making enough art that you get to a point where you want to keep making that is important too. So yeah, for artists coming to UGallery, yeah, we ask for an application that's pretty simple. It's just kind of contact details. And we ask them to submit 10 works that they created in the last 2 years. So that
Okay.
usually is a good place to start so that we
Yeah.
can see what people have been doing. We pay attention to dates, how much art people create. It's kind of important for us to be successful. As I said, we need enough art. So if artists
Yeah.
only have 10 pieces from 2020, probably say, okay, well, when you make a new series, come back and we'll take a look at it. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the starting point with quantity.
That's really interesting. I think it's when people are just starting out, I think it's really useful to know that information because
Yeah,
if you're going to do it and take it seriously, you kind of need to know how much you're going to how much time you're going to have to commit to it. Maybe if you've got a day job and things like that, and like how much can I give to this and how much is required and how much is required
yeah,
to be successful. I think that's really useful advice. Um, I'd just like to speak a bit about how you've I suppose I just want to talk a bit about the struggles that artists go through and if you've got any advice for I suppose if people are getting stuck or kind of feeling like they I guess words of encouragement or help if people are wanting to go on this route would be useful I think
yeah.
to kind of budding artists.
That's nice. I really like that. I try and be as kind of encouraging as I can to everyone who wants to make art because it's like anything, it's a hard path to follow, but I think it's really rewarding and it's kind of a unique place to be in the world to share your. I always say art is the ultimate human expression. There are a lot of different forms of art, of course, but it's
Yeah.
how we can kind of relate to each other as people. So it serves such an amazing and important role in the world. I think for me, that art plus travel has made me realize that we're all the same in the world and going through our own kind of joys and struggles. So I always just tell artists that if you're feeling stuck or having a struggle, talk to the people around you about it, talk to other artists because there's a really kind of solitary element to art making, but actually
Yeah.
there's this really wonderful community around all of us. And it's kind of the same for gallerists and artists alike. Anyone who's in this kind of art world ecosystem, we can all help each other by just having a good conversation, talking about what we're trying to accomplish and what we're currently stuck on. And I think
Yeah.
for me, I've always, since we started UGallery, I've always tried to surround myself with advisors, people I trust. And I don't think that's just something for business owners. I think it's the same for artists. Having
Yeah.
kind of your board of advisors, your trusted confidants, who you can say, "This is where I'm at with this. What do I do?" And those are the mentors that will get you through those hard times. So I say, when you're stuck, talk to people about it, and just
Yeah.
know that we're all out there trying to do the same thing. I've always felt that way about this. We're kind of in the same boat together. It's not a competition. It's how can we get more art out into the world? How can we help each other be more successful? Because it's just kind of a meandering journey, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any kind of art communities or people that some of your artists join, or groups or things like that you've heard of?
Yeah, I think in modern times, especially the UGallery artists, they often use Facebook. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's still the most common. I think Instagram, but Facebook is nice for, I think, the kind of camaraderie and forums, and maybe
Yeah.
it speaks to my demographic of artists. But then I grew up in a small arts town, and it was mostly about kind of studio mates and people who share the building, who were there to support each other. And as much as possible, I always still say, I mean, I have an online business, but I always say, get people to help you face to face, because
Yeah.
I think that there's something that's, especially in art, really important. Even studio critiques and things like that. Having local groups to look at each other's art and help each other that way is good. But really, Facebook is great. Social media is great for that sort of thing,
Yeah,
because you
it
can connect with
is.
people from all over. And I think that's really powerful.
I suppose people could also kind of start their own local group, as you say, or kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
meet people in person that way. I think that was probably quite useful if you're just starting out, finding other people who want to do the same thing as you, and chatting to them in real
Yeah.
life, as you say, as as
Yeah,
people are
there's
veering away from that, but it's
yeah,
it's
there was a group that I spoke with in San Francisco, the San Francisco Artist Network. It's
yeah,
run by another artist named Stephen Wagner, and he did the most amazing workshops to bring people together. He did portfolio review workshops. He had
wow,
gallerists come in to look at artist work, and then he had talks where it was gallerists and artists, helping. And he created this whole network of people just to help
wow,
each other, and it was really
that's
cool.
brilliant.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it depends where you're at, obviously, what city or town you live in, but that kind of thing is really great. And you can always look to see where you can find more of that sort of thing. I think that artists need it, truly.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if there isn't one set up for you, then yes, do the
Just
work and set it up for yourself.
just another side project, just another
Yeah,
small
just
side
another thing you
project.
have to
Yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah.
Well, on that note, Alex, it's been so great to chat to you today. Thank you so much for all of your insights and advice for artists. I think that's so, so useful. So it's been fantastic, and take care, and I'll speak to you soon.
Wonderful. Thanks for your time. I enjoyed chatting with you
Thank
too.
you. Take care. So I really hope you enjoyed that episode with Alex. So many valuable insights there. Really fantastic bunch of information there that will help any artist get into galleries online or brick and mortar. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I'll see you for the next one. And if you want to go to becominganartist.co.uk, you can also download the Becoming Part of an Online Gallery exact steps diagram that I've created, and you can also get all of the resources from Alex and from all of the other podcast episodes. So I'll see you in the next one, and keep creating.